800-467-2766. 800-467-2766.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
If you've ever broken or chipped a tooth, you know that it can take days and even weeks before it's finally repaired. But at Dentistry of Wisconsin, if you're in need of a tooth repair, they can do the entire...
It is now time for the Garden Doctor here on WBEV 95.3, powered by Daily Dodge. Here is your host of the Garden Doctor alongside Dick Zontag. We have got Thomas Rayfeld. Thomas?
Thank you. Thank you so much there, Craig. As we are still getting some of the cobwebs out, this is the very first Garden Doctor of the year, and we are also streaming on DailyDodge.com on the TV tab as we work through a couple issues right now. This is always exciting because I think this is probably a good analogy to maybe what we're trying to do in our gardens. We don't have an idea. We're still trying to work through some things. Maybe our rototiller is not working correctly, or maybe we don't have the right potting soil. Well, that's why we have Dick Zondag and the Garden Doctor joining us today. Dick, how is it going? How are you, sir?
Things are going great. Yep. The sun's out. The snow's disappearing, although I think we're getting more this weekend. But it's time to start thinking about spring.
Absolutely. And when your hours right now in the Randolph store, you guys are open, is it still 6 days a week except for Sundays and
Right.
10 to 4?
10 to 4, right.
So are those your wintertime hours, or do those change at all in spring?
The winter hours, this is pretty much what we are in Randolph pretty much all year round, 10 to 4. So, it's Monday through Saturday.
And I was noticing, because I'm trying to get more into the soil again and trying to find a more regenerative hobby.
Right.
And I realized I'm not going to be able to get out of work early enough to make it to Jung's by 4. But I was checking out your website, and you make it really easy to find everything you need, shop, browse around, and order everything online.
Yes, we have several websites, but jungseed.com is the main website, and everything that we have in the catalog is on the website, plus a few web specials and things like that. So if you want to sign up for a catalog, you can sign up for a catalog. We have our store hours. We actually have a separate website for the seed company and for the garden center. So each garden center has its own Facebook page, and we try to keep those things up to date. And so if you have any questions, that's where you should head.
How easy is it for somebody, if I order something on that website, I can get it shipped to me. Can I also pick it up at the Seed Center in Randolph?
It's pretty easy to get things shipped to you. We do that once in a while, but it's better if it's going through the website to get it shipped directly to your house. So, but everything that's in the garden center is available online too. So, things are available, and it's time to start thinking about starting some of your seeds, some of the peppers and petunias. Some of the flower seeds should be started fairly soon, and very easy to do that. You really need to start with a soilless mix, because when you're using garden soil in a mix, if there are microorganisms that are in the soil that damp off the seedlings, they like the same conditions. The spores germinate in the same conditions as seeds do, and so it's best if you start with a soilless soil mix. And we have several different varieties in the garden center. We have a Jung seed starting mix. We have Jiffy mix. We also have some potting mixes that are just strictly peat based. And bottom heat is the next thing that you should think about, because the seeds will come up more uniformly, especially with the smallest seeds like the petunias and things like that. If you use anything but a seed starting mix, you're probably going to fail.
Okay, that actually, I had a lot of questions about seed starting and what that process looks like this time of year. Also have some questions about the new flower lineup you have for 2023. You have some new spring arrivals on your website. You have lots of stuff. I was really surprised by the assortment of seeds you have, even mushroom grow kits. So a lot of questions I'm excited to get to, but as we continue, we want to know what your questions are for the Garden Doctor, Dick Zondag from Jung's Garden Center. You can either call us 1-920-885-4446. You can also give us a text, 920-887-9595, if you have a question of how to prepare a garden or perhaps starting seeds indoors. So is this too early to start planting seeds indoors? Should we be starting indoors?
There are some seeds that it's too soon. Your coles crops like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, and things like that, it's really too early. Tomatoes, it's probably too early. But we're getting to the point now where, especially if we have an early spring, peppers and some of those other things can be started. But one of the things that I always tell people when I go out doing public speaking is should be having a notebook where you keep track of when you start things and how fast they come up when you transplant them, and then when you plant them out. And if they're too tall or too spindly, start them a little later. If they're not big enough, then you start them a little bit earlier. And by keeping a notebook on conditions that the plants are in when you're going to be starting them outside, you can figure out exactly when you need to start things, and then also keep track of the varieties so that if it does well in your garden, you can know exactly what you're going to order next year.
Now, are you more of an advocate to having a journal or some sort of layout to actually plan what your garden is going to look out or where you want things? Because some crops are going to do well together, but if you have crops that are going to grow pretty tall, you don't want them blocking that sunlight out from some of the smaller crops.
The taller vegetables should be planted towards the north side of the garden so that they don't shade the smaller vegetables, and then you should rotate where you put your vegetables each year so that you're not planting tomatoes on the same ground that you planted tomatoes last year, because there are diseases that can build up in the soil. So rotate your crops. We do have if you're technology oriented, we have a software package that, not ours, but it's one that we recommend, that you can keep track year to year what vegetables you've planted, and it also has a very good guide as to when you start things and when you plant things out, and it works really, really good.
I know we've had conversations about trying to test the soil and seeing what the acid levels may be, and that's something that, do you offer soil testing kits like that? I think we had a conversation, but it took a little while to get those results back.
The best way to do that is to take a soil sample to the county agent, have them send it into the state testing lab, telling them what you're going to be planting, and they can do a better analysis on that. We do have some meters that you can use, but probably best to get a soil test done. And then if you use good organic methods of growing, where you're composting your leaves, composting and adding compost to the garden every year, and as long as the leaves of the plants are nice dark green and the plants are growing, you probably don't have to do a soil test again, because by adding the compost to the soil, you're enriching it. We're doing a lot more, or I'm doing a lot more with raised bed gardening, and that is becoming a real big thing especially on YouTube. If you want to get a lot of information on planting in raised beds. In fact, the Garden Doctor has its own channel now.
Yes.
And we are doing videos on, how to plant things, when to plant things, how to do a raised bed garden. I did a video last fall on how to build a raised bed garden, and then how you space things out and where you plant them. And we're doing a lot of videos on things now because that seems to be the newest thing to get people to come back to you.
Well, I think those visual examples really help people that maybe struggle with just the reading of directions. And your channel is just The Garden Doctor on YouTube?
Yep. Garden Doctor channel, yep, on YouTube. And you can get to it from our website also. If you go to jungc.com, there's a Garden Doctor video button on there where you can get to all the videos that I've done so far. And we're going to be doing a lot more. We're got a lot of plans for things this summer to kind of get caught up on the competition.
So you've been a radio star for a while, but how does it feel being a video star now? Is it impossible to walk on the streets of Randolph while people saying, "Hey, it's the Garden Doctor"?
I think I'm pretty well known in Randolph. So yeah, no, it's just another avenue where we can reach our customers and help them out with different problems that they have and give them information so when they do plant our products, they have much better luck with it.
Well, as we continue our conversation, certainly talking about raised beds, because you have some collection of raised beds in different pots that people can find online on your website. But when it comes to getting comfortable with your soil, of having a conversation with your soil, of knowing what your soil conditions are
Right.
like, what are you looking for? What are some of the site tests of what conditions your soil's in?
Well, the big thing with a garden is to have an area where you've got at least a half a day to 3/4 of a day of sunlight, because almost all vegetables like to have full sunlight. And so that's the number one thing in siting a garden. And the number two thing, of course, is the soil. And if you've got a heavy clay soil, then you want to amend it with a lot of compost and sand, which gives you much better drainage. If you've got a sandy soil, again, adding a lot of compost to the soil will help to hold the moisture in the area. With sandy soil, you want to do a lot more mulching because that also helps with the water and nutrient retention, and it will also add organic matter to your soil as those mulches break down and become compost or become organic matter. With a silt-type soil like we have in this area, just maintaining a good culture of adding, composting your leaves in the fall and adding them to your garden each year will help you keep the soil in good shape. And as I said before, the color of the leaves are the telltale thing. If the color of the leaves are a nice dark green, and you're getting good plant growth, you're probably got pretty good soil.
I want to circle back around to compost, but let's go to the phones and say good morning. Welcome. You are with the Garden Doctor.
Good morning. You had just said something about you should try to rotate where you plant your tomatoes and stuff. I have such a small area. I mean, it's hard to do that. And I have another garden behind the house, but it's too much shade. And my tomatoes didn't do well there, but between we live in town here, between two houses, I get sun like all day, and they did fantastic the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. But I had the same place. But is there something I can put into the soil, like you were talking about some diseases that I could do?
Right. I think the big thing is to read the description of the variety that you're using, because the newer hybrids tend to have more disease resistant. The soil-borne diseases are the verticillium wilts and another one called rhizoctonia. And
well, I had the giant Roma
okay,
Amish tomatoes.
paste,
They're
yeah.
as big as my hand. Yeah.
Mhm. That's a very
And-
good tomato for canning, actually
Yes.
for fresh eating too, because they get quite large and
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
they-
Yes, yeah. One slice across a sandwich, and you've got a
you
mouthful.
got it made. Yep.
Right.
But yeah, what I would do is just I don't know how many. Do you have enough room so that you can put them in a different spot each, or
Well,
have like a 2 or a 3 year rotation?
Well, last year I had tried these. They're huge planters. They're like size of a whiskey barrel, a half
Okay.
of one, but a little taller, and they're plastic. And I had 3, 4 of them, one in each one.
Right.
But they didn't do near as well as the ones that I had, where there was more soil and stuff, the
Right.
planters I had alongside the house.
What soil did you use in the planters?
Garden style.
Yeah, see, when you're doing a container, you almost have to use a more organic soil, like the soil that I recommend is like a third sand, a third garden soil, and a third different types of composts. And that makes a really, a much more friable, a much looser soil. And plants will do much better. If you just use straight garden soil, the soil tends to get much harder, and the plants don't grow as well in it. So I would say half soil, half compost, or a third sand, a third compost, a third garden soil is a much better mix for a container than just straight garden soil.
Oh, so if I would take like 2/3 of it out and then put these others and mix them up, I should be able to.
Yeah, that's what I would do. In fact, I would take it all out and
Take it out.
and then
Okay.
just mix them together on a tarp or something like that, and then you can
Right.
just, so that you've got a homogeneous mixture of soils, and that will help you a lot. And then each spring, you don't have to dump them out each spring, but then you want to add either compost or fertilization. Use a well-balanced fertilizer to give them some fertility, because as the plant grows, it takes things out of the soil. And so, adding a fertilizer into the top 3 or 4 inches of soil, and then the rain will take it down, that would help replenish the nutrients that the plants took up.
Yeah, I don't have a compost bin type thing, but when we mow the lawn in the fall to pick up all the leaves,
Right?
we sprinkle them on everything, because they're chopped up,
Yeah.
And then like during the winter months now here, when I would peel carrots or potatoes, I take that and just take it and just fling it out in the garden, because I can do it over the deck.
Well, one of the things you could do with the leaves in the fall that would really help a lot is if you make a pile of leaves rather than just spreading them on top. And what you do is you put out 6 inches of the leaves and the grass clippings, and then on top of that you'd put a little fertilizer and some soil, and then another 6 inches of organic matter and the fertilizer and the soil, and then put some water in it so that the mixture is moist, and you'd be surprised how well they'd compost over the winter. And then you could just
Right in the
add that
back.
to the soil next spring.
Okay, right on top of the garden, then you mean?
Yeah, right on top of the garden.
Oh, it says spread
Even
it
if
out,
you just
pile it
get
up.
some snow fencing or some chicken wire or something, and then just kind of make a small compost pile, that would really work well. And it would get your leaves broken down, where if you just put a layer of leaves on top of the soil, there's very little decomposition that's going on, because you need to get sort of a critical mass to get the microorganisms that do the decomposition going. And maybe even once or twice during the winter, just mix the contents up a little bit. That would help also.
Oh, okay, if it isn't too frozen.
No, what you'll find is that the heat that's given off by those microorganisms as they're doing the decomposition will keep that pile from freezing
Oh,
if
that's
you do
great.
it correctly.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I know 2 years ago I had gotten how many yardage of horse manure and spread it on everything. And so I did that 2 years ago, and that helped. So
Yep.
maybe,
That-
if I probably do that again this year or next year again,
Sure.
and add that on.
Yep.
I have a friend that has a horse, so then she saves it for me.
Sure, yeah. And actually, you could mix that with the leaves and the grass clippings that you do in the fall, because that horse manure has some nutrients in it that can also help with the breakdown of those leaves.
Oh, because see, I had after the garden, in the fall when I had taken everything out, I had spread it across everything,
Sure. Well,
And I
mix it
figure-
with your leaves and your grass clippings, and that will also increase the speed of the decomposition. You'll have much better compost
Oh,
in the spring.
okay. I'll remember that. All
Okay.
right. Thank you much.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you for the call. If you have a question for the garden doctor, you can always call 1-920-885-4446 or the talk and text line 920-887-9595. And Dick, we start off the very first episode probably with the most important part of a garden. It's the word you probably said 20 times already today: compost, compost,
Yeah.
compost. And as you mentioned, making sure that you have that mass, mixing things together. You can add manures as long as it's not from an animal that's a carnivore. You want herbaceous mammals and their excrement in your compost. What if we don't have a compost pile? Is it too late now to make some compost?
I mean, right now, it probably wouldn't. But if you've got raw leaves, what you could do is compost them now for next spring. I always tell people, if you recognize the components that you put in your compost pile, so if you can see the leaves and things like that, it's probably best to turn them over and keep them in the compost pile until next spring. Because what happens if you add raw organic matter like leaves or grass clippings or straw or hay or anything to the soil, the microorganisms in the soil that break down that organic matter will be competing with your plants for the nutrients that are in the soil. And when you have that competition, the microorganisms win out, and your garden may have lots of nutrients in it, but they'll be tied up by the microorganisms that are breaking down the organic matter. So it's probably best to have that raw organic matter somewhat broken down before you add it to your soil.
What sort of things do we want to add and want to avoid adding to our compost pile?
You don't want to add any kind of meat or fat or any kind of things like that that are not compostable. Scraps from your table that have been alive at one time. But coffee grounds are excellent. They acidify the pile. Grass clippings, like I said, and chopped up leaves. Table scrap, the orange peels, eggshells give calcium to the, even you run them through your blender to kind of blend them up so that they're more readily available to the compost pile. But any kind of fruits or anything that comes from a plant can be composted. So that you just add that to the compost pile. Like I said, if you can recognize the things as they've gone into the pile, just leave them in the garden for another year, and then they'll be ready to go next spring.
And it's probably something to be said of having multiple piles then rather than one giant pile?
Well, if you're really good at it and you do a lot of composting, there are people that have multiple compost bins. So if you're getting finished compost, they would be in the first bin, and the bins that were working would be in the second bin, and then the raw material would be in the third bin. And then as the pile settles in the second bin, you added the raw organic matter to it, and then as it finishes, you put it in the finished pile. So there are people that do that. Another thing that some people do too is if they've got a compost pile in the back of the yard where they've got some kind of fencing or something around them, they'll take the fencing away and set it up next to it, and then just throw the pile over from the area where it was into where you moved the compost bin, and that also mixes it so that the compost works better.
Speaking with Dick Zondag, the garden doctor from Jung's Garden Center. You can find their catalog online at jungseed.com. Let's go to the phones again and say good morning, caller. What is your question for the garden doctor?
Well, hello, garden doctor.
Good morning.
I'm a real advocate for our monarchs, and so I'm planning this spring to plant a milkweed garden. Do you have any suggestions for me?
Yeah, there are several different milkweeds that you can plant. There are some different colored ones. The Asclepias tuberosa, which is the regular milkweed, attracts monarchs quite well, but there are other plants that will attract butterflies, like the monardas will attract butterflies. And there are several other perennials that you can use that will attract butterflies. So it's not only milkweed that you can use, but there are other plants that can be planted in a butterfly garden so that you get a more diverse color palette and things that flower at different times so that there's more nectar available for those butterflies over the summer.
I did receive a bunch of seed. Do you suggest I start that in the house and then plant them outside in the spring?
It depends on what seed. Are you talking about a mix of seed?
I got them from the Monarch Foundation. So
Okay. No,
I don't know what.
I think a
nutrition-
lot of those mixtures can be started outdoors.
Okay.
And what you do is you just work the soil up
Sure.
and you scatter the seed on top of the soil and then you rake it so that you incorporate it into the top 2 inches or so, 2 or 3 inches. And then you pat the soil down so that the seed and the soil come in good contact. And then you put a mulch over top of it.
Mulch, okay.
So that when it rains, the moisture stays for a longer period of time, and that's what needs to happen so that the seed can germinate.
Okay. Any particular side of a lot of full sun for that?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I would say a butterfly garden likes to be in full sun.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for the call. We still have time to take your calls as well. 887-9595 is our talk and text line, or 885-4446. And Dick, going back a little ways to that tomato question and some of the growing systems that you have some growing systems that could actually hold a potato plant or potato or even tomatoes. Do you recommend those at all?
Yes, I think if you go online and go to the YouTube channels that talk about growing tomatoes, there are very few people that grow tomatoes on the ground anymore. I mean, when I was growing up, that's the only way you did it. You just let them grow. But having something that you can train them on gets the plants up off the ground and keeps them from getting the soil splashing on the leaves, which in some cases is where the first infection comes. So we do have what are called grafted tomatoes too, and they're especially useful with some of the heirloom varieties that are more susceptible to the early blight. And you should train them up on wires, or there are a lot of different systems. I mean, there are just probably hundreds of different systems of growing tomatoes, but what you got to do is get them up off the ground, and you remove the bottom foot of foliage so that the splashing rain doesn't get on that foliage. But and then you take the suckers out of the first couple of sets of leaves, and that gives you the earlier fruiting. We're going to be doing a lot of work this summer with different systems of growing tomatoes, so we can show people how to do it.
Probably the easiest way would be getting some tomatoes already from jungs that have already grown. Do we want to be starting tomatoes inside at all?
Well, tomatoes can be started indoors. It's probably a little bit early yet because I would say if you're starting tomato seeds, it's probably 6 to 8 weeks before you're going to plant them out. And then you want to have a week when you're setting the plants outside where they're still in the containers that you grew them in to harden them off. And then when you plant the tomatoes outside, you can plant them out with pretty good reliability as far as them coming through.
So that's an essential part. If we start anything indoors, giving at least a period of a week to harden them.
Right. You take them out during the day and let them experience the wind, the sunlight, full sunlight, and that kind of hardens them off so that when you plant them out, you're not going from an environment where there's no wind and they usually get enough moisture and everything is kind of optimal to an environment where they're getting blown around and you may get rain or you may not get rain. And so, yeah, hardening them off is pretty essential.
So it's kind of like high school for plants then.
Yes, yeah.
Got to get them ready for the adult life of actually being in the
Exactly.
soil.
Get ready for the outdoors.
It does make a lot of sense. There was another type of container you had, the aeration containers. These are much larger. What sort of plants might we plant in the larger ones?
Well, if you want to grow potatoes in a container, if you've got a very small area, the potatoes can be grown in those in those sacks. Some people will grow tomatoes in them. You can grow almost anything in them. But there again, it's the soil that you have to have to make the optimal for it too. You can't just fill the bag with garden soil and expect the plants to thrive. So you really need a quite organic soil if you're using a container for growing plants. And so, you can also use them as ornamentals too. I mean, you can plant some of the trailing petunias or make a mixed container out of it. And they do require more water because they're exposed on all their sides, and so that heats the soil up, and evaporation happens a lot more. So you'll need to do more watering than you do when you're growing in the ground. But it gives you the versatility of, some people even start them indoors 3 or 4 weeks before they take them outside, before the danger of frost is gone. And if we're going to get a hard freeze and you don't want to cover them up, you can bring them indoors too. So those containers give you some versatility in what you can do with your plants.
I had some friends that had some old trash cans that they cut off in half and then drilled some holes in the bottom to allow drainage. But
Right.
because they were black, they did heat up a lot. So you do
Yep.
have to add a lot more water than
Yep.
might be necessary.
And with a loose or open soil, it does require more watering also.
Dick Zondag, the Garden Doctor, the very first episode of the season. So if you don't have a question now, but maybe you're thinking later tonight, oh, I did have something for him. Well, don't worry. This is only episode 1. And one final question when it comes to compost. Again, especially you mentioned every sort of container plant needs to have a mix of compost or organic soil. I can get organic soil from Jungs. Can I get sand or anything else that I might need from Jungs?
We do sell play sand. The other thing that you can use in place of compost is peat moss. We sell a lot of peat, and it's used for making your soil much more friable. But composting is becoming very, very popular, and so we have several different kinds of compost. Also, we have the cow manure, we have leaf, and all those sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
Well, as we start winding down with the last 8 minutes or so of the show, I was very surprised browsing your website that you have mushroom grow kits.
Yeah, they're mushroom mushroom soil that are that's inoculated with the spawn that you need for growing mushrooms, and you just add a little bit of water and you put them in a dark place, and the mushrooms start coming.
That is kind of magical, but it can be just a basement then? You just
Oh,
leave
yeah,
them in your basement?
or under a sink, or anywhere where it's dark. You want to keep those them dark so that the mushrooms stay a light color.
And how long would they produce mushrooms for?
It's usually about a 3 or 4 week period of time, and then the mushroom is spent, and then you can add that organic matter to the soil. I mean, that's just compost basically, and mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of different funguses, and the fungi produce the mushrooms, and once all the nutrients are used up, then they no longer do that.
We have a question on the text line from Brenda. She has a lot of houseplants, and she's wondering how soon she can bring them outside. And if she's wanting to start begonias, what kind of soil would she need? When should they go outside? And thank you for your help.
Okay, the houseplant thing, you have to wait until the danger of frost is gone. The houseplants are sensing that it's time to start growing because the days are getting longer. They can tell from the day length that summer is coming, but you certainly wouldn't want to put them outside yet. I would say probably the middle of May, if you're going to put them outside, the middle of May, the first part of June. And then as far as begonias are concerned, you want to use a peat-based soil also, or just straight peat moss. And you can plant them or put the bulbs right next to each other to get them started. With begonias, the concave part of the bulb should be up. You can kind of see where the leaf scars are on the bulb where the plant was last year, and so that should go up. You put them maybe a couple of inches of peat or bark or peat or compost on the bottom, and then you cover the bulbs, and then once they get a couple sets of leaves, you transplant them into a 4-inch pot and grow them until after the danger of frost is gone. And then by the time that, if you plant them now, by the time it's time to plant them out, they'll probably be in flower.
Well, we got a couple more calls. Let's see if we can get them in for the garden doctor. Let's go back to the phones. Good morning, caller. What question do you have?
Good morning. I plant these sweet potato vines for my flowers, and they hang down and look beautiful.
Sure.
And when I pulled everything apart for fall and put them away, the planters and stuff, here one of them had a potato on it.
Yeah.
Is it edible? Can you eat it?
I'm pretty sure they are.
Okay. 'cause
They're a
it's
different
red.
color, but yeah, they're red, but I'm pretty sure they're edible.
Okay. All the years I've done it is the first time I ever
Yeah,
had a
those
potato.
vines, if they grow properly, they will form sweet potatoes in that container.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank you.
actually, what you could do with them too
Yeah.
is you could just keep them and start your vines from those potatoes.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any eyes, so do I cut it up like a potato?
No, not like a potato. What I would do is just set it sort of on its end and put it in a glass of water.
Oh. Okay.
Not all the way, but just so the bottom is in the.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, like they show with the toothpicks in the.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And when should I start that?
I do it right now.
Oh, right now.
And if
oh.
it gets to be too long, just just trim them back.
Oh, okay. I'll try that. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much for your question. And I believe we have one more caller on the line with us for the garden doctor. Good morning, caller. No, I think that was our only call. But, Dick, a lot of people are excited right now. Obviously, starting indoors, if you need a grow kit, you're the place to go to. If you need
Right.
organic soil, you have it all.
We have everything there. We actually sell a starter kit where you get the plastic flat, the plastic inserts, the dome for keeping the moisture in, and if you want to really go deluxe, we've got the heating mats that will make a big difference in the way the seeds come up. Our people in the stores also talk gardening, so you don't have to have the garden doctor. We have good people in our garden centers that will help you with if you need to find it, or if you need to get directed to the soil that you use or how you start them. We have pamphlets on it also, so you need a hand with it, or you're looking for the instructions on how to do it. I would suggest starting small, starting a few plants. The easier to start ones are like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and cabbage and cauliflower and things like that. Once you get a good start on that, then you can add the petunias and the impatiens and things like that are a little bit more difficult to get going.
Well, we are planting impatiens, but we want to thank the patience of our next caller who just called in. Thank you so much. What is your question for the garden doctor?
Good morning. I'm just wondering, you're talking about container planting and everything. Can you put strawberries in containers and plant that way?
Yeah, of course, you can use strawberries. And what I would do with the strawberries, there are 3 different types of strawberries. There's the day neutral, there's the everbearing, and then the June bearing. You want to use the day neutral or the everbearing strawberries, the varieties, Ozark Beauty, TriStar. They're all described in the catalog or online, because then you're getting berries in a couple of different seasons. And what you want to do is, in fact, I started some strawberries about a week and a half ago in the greenhouse. We did a video on it, where I'm going to be following them through the spring and showing you how to plant them and stuff. But yeah, you can just plant them, get them started. I would recommend probably taking the first couple of sets of flowers off, because you want the strength of the leaves to go into growing the plants. But yeah, a lot of people grow strawberries in containers.
Do they need to have special care then, like for over winter then, like come fall?
You'd want to put them in your garage if your garage doesn't freeze real hard. If it does, if you've got a cool basement, that would also work.
Do you water them right up until you would take them inside then?
Yes,
or do
yep. You want to keep them in good shape right up until the time it gets cold outside. And then
Do you have
bring
to
them in,
water-
I would bring them in before you get a hard freeze on them,
Okay.
okay?
Do you have to water them over winter then, or do you just leave them?
A couple times a month, just so they don't dry out completely.
Okay.
We want to keep the soil not real wet, but not let it dry out, and then they'll be fine.
Okay, so you're thinking more of the everbearing or the, what did you call the other one?
Day neutral.
Day neutral.
That means
okay.
that they'll, when they get a bud, they go ahead and flower and fruit.
Is there any other kind of fruit that you can put in a container that would do the same as a strawberry would do? Is there a blueberry that would work?
If you're going to do blueberries, you want to do them not in a hanging basket. You'd want to do those in a regular container that's probably a 5-gallon container or better.
Okay.
But those have to definitely be brought into the garage because the roots are not as hardy as the tops. And because the container is exposed to the cold weather all the way around and not just the surface, the root ball tends to freeze much harder and it will kill the root system. So you need, if you're going to grow blueberries or any of the other fruits in containers, you want to bring them into a garage or something where they get a little protection in the wintertime, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your call. And Dick, I think we have time for one final question here. This one is from Cameron. What would be the best raised bed in the area for outside herbs like basil, thyme, or oregano?
All of the herbs will grow well in a raised bed. If you're going to grow the perennial herbs, the ones that, the rosemary and some of the thyme and some of those that will come back year after year, you want to plant them more towards the center of the raised bed, and you plant the annual ones like basil and some of those on the edges of the raised bed. But yeah, a lot of people grow herbs in their raised bed gardens.
And when it comes to raised beds or any of the materials you'll need to grow them in the mediums, Jung's Garden Center, the place to go.
We do have them, but boy, they're so easy to make from any scraps. And there are so many videos on the YouTube about raised bed gardening, and it's really popular and very, very productive.
Well, this has been an exceptional time. Cannot wait to check out some of your Garden Doctor videos on YouTube as well. If you have any questions about raised beds, you had that one from last fall. You're going to be making some new ones.
Yep.
Where can people find Jung Garden Centers?
We actually have 7 garden centers now. We have 3 in the Madison area, 1 in Randolph, 1 in Stevens Point, 1 in Appleton, and now 1 in Stoughton also. So got them all over central Wisconsin. And the store hours are in Randolph are 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday. We're not open on Sunday in Randolph. The other garden centers are also 10 to 5 on Monday through Friday, 10 to 4 on Saturday and Sunday.
And what is the best website to reach if anyone wants something?
It's just very simple. It's just jungseed.com or junggardencenter.com.
Well, Dick, this has been great. I am so jealous of your fingernails right now. I've noticed the dirt underneath.
I was out planting lavender this morning in the greenhouse.
Oh, fresh lavender?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, that's a conversation and a question for a different time.
Yep.
Dick, this has been such a blast. Cannot wait for next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you as well. The following has been a paid program. The views and opinions expressed are solely that of Jung's Garden Center, not WBAV, ESPN, nor Good Karma Brands.
You want to